I appreciate people being frightened to go there, to the concept that purely because you have white skin, you are privileged, whether or not you're related to those people biologically or not. You have simply in being benefited from what happened. There's been a benefit to your life. And yes, your life might still have been really difficult and uncomfortable. And your skin didn't make that harder.
Hey everyone, welcome to Josette's Soul Salon, where we have weekly conversations that answer the question, what does it take to live a soul-expressed life? I'm your host, Josette Leblanc, and during this episode, I speak with Gillard and Anja Naundorf-Adu, two dear friends and partners on this path of doing what we can to build an anti-racist practice. We met during Thérèse Cator's Embodiment Solidarity program, which is open for enrollment at the time of this episode. It goes without saying, but Anja, Joe, and I highly recommend this program. Working on anti-racism is an ongoing commitment. It's a topic that brings up so many emotions, it can feel overwhelming. So slowing down, being gentle, and understanding what's going on in our bodies is a crucial part of engaging with it. This is what today's helped us learn. Before you continue listening, I want to give a heads up. If you identify as a Black, Indigenous, or person of color, you may want to sit this episode out, unless you're willing to hold space for women who talk about their journey of unpacking their whiteness. You don't need to carry that emotional burden. This episode is meant to give you a peek into the ongoing anti-racism work we're doing. It's meant to inspire white people who may be struggling with how to approach this work. We aren't anti-racism experts, and we aren't looking for praise for being good. No one deserves praise for trying to be decent. I also want to take this chance to correct a term I used in the episode. The term I used was internalized racism. Internalized racism isn't something that's experienced by white people. I highly recommend you Google the term like I did. You'll learn a lot. What I should have said instead is that our intentions are to do what we can to dismantle racism and build an anti-racism practice. You'll want to listen to the end of this conversation to hear Joe and Anja's biggest tip for creating an anti-racism practice that's sustainable. To connect with Anja and Joe, check the links in the show notes, where you'll also find a huge list of resources for your anti-racism practice. And if you enjoy what you hear, make sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. Now let's get into the salon. Hey, ladies or loves. So good to see you here, Joe and Anja. I'm so excited that we're here together today to have this conversation about, basically, the truth of it is, how to build the world that we envision. And our exploration through that is looking at our white privilege, our internalized racism. And these are difficult conversations that the three of us have been having for less than a year, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe. Yeah, the three of us met in Thérèse Cator's course, Embodied Solidarity, which is a course that she created for white women on their exploration and of their white privilege and their unpacking of their internalized racism. And we are here today to share our journey imperfectly. We ask that the listeners give us some grace because this is, I have chills right now. It is a difficult topic to talk about. It's not difficult because it's not important. That's not the point. It's vulnerable when we put ourselves in these positions of knowing that we are going to get it wrong. We're just going to get it wrong. But the point of getting it wrong is so that we can get it right. So I'm going to open it up to you two to just introduce yourselves a bit. What's your context? Where are you right now? Where are you living? And I'll get the ball rolling in a bit.
I'll go. Yeah, I'm Anja Naundorf-Adu. I'm from Germany. In context of this conversation we're having, I'm a white German woman, born and raised in the former German Democratic Republic, which is important because in this sense, the country I was born in doesn't exist anymore. And some generations back, I have grandparents who had been involved in one of the most, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My grandparents, they were raised during the Nazi era. So from this perspective, I have a responsibility that I feel about dealing with these issues of racism, supremacy. And towards the other direction, like the future, my kid, who's mixed race, has experiences that I did not have as a kid and that I still don't share, but I feel I need to learn and unlearn a lot to make our family and our community a little bit more safe. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm coming from.
Yes, thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's so important to be able to look at our history and understand where we're going, right? Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Jo, how about you?
Yes, thank you, Josette. I'm Jo Gillard, and I am actually coming in today from Australia, from Melbourne, Australia, and this is where I was born and raised. And so honoring the peoples, the First Nation peoples, as a white person living in Australia, the land that I was raised on is the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation, which it would be fair to say I did not know about until quite recently. And this journey has been an interesting one for me. Therese was really amazing for me in creating a safe space to start unpacking this concept of white privilege, which I am hugely conscious of now and can see how privileged I have been. I'm living with my family now in London, which has a lot more diversity in terms of the people that my children and myself are exposed to, and there are different backgrounds each day. But in Australia, I was not exposed to a huge amount of diversity, with the exception of peoples from different countries in Europe who ultimately really nowadays are white passings people. So, really, really wanted to show up and have this conversation with you guys in the desire that more white people with privilege can start feeling safe enough and not triggered to have these conversations, because it's really, really important. And the work that I do is really encouraging and helping people to live their lives guided by love. And if I'm finding out places where I'm actually not doing that, or I have this unconscious, collective, cultural, societal, I'm here for it. I'm ready to do the work, and I want to figure it out. And we've been doing some of that work, and I know I've got a long way to go. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for both of you for stepping up and saying yes to this request to go public and live to talk about this topic, because we have been meeting, since that course, which was last summer, 2021, and we've been meeting bi-monthly to just keep up, like to stay accountable to this topic. So for context, my name is Josette Leblanc, as you might know by now if you're listening to my podcast, hopefully. And I am living in South Korea, but I was born and raised in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I would call myself an Acadian, which is the Acadian culture, the French colonizers who came to that part of Nova Scotia name themselves Acadians now. The original land is Mi'kmaq, which belongs to the Mi'kmaq people. I came to this work, especially to Therese's course, because I was still bumping up against, I would just unintentionally harming. This is the thing when we don't explore this topic as white people. There's so much unintentional harm that may happen, And I noticed a few times through like some pretty challenging episodes that I was unintentionally harming. And so that did not sit well with my purpose, which is, like Joe, like Anja, is to lead with love, to lead a soul expressed life. And my soul, I know our souls are, and this is my belief, is that is love. Our souls are love. Like that is the essence of life, is love, is creation. And I know that I came into this human body to learn everything there is about the challenges of being human. And this is where we are right now. We're not in a place where love is leading. And if I can do anything to support the collective to bring more in alignment with love, then, I know I got to do my work, because even somebody who's as aligned as me was still causing harm. So that gives us context. But so some of the questions we want to explore today. So we talked a little bit about what called us to this work. And we also talked about, why is this work important for white people? But maybe let's talk about what we've discovered because we have been reading the book, Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. What are some challenges that we have found on this stumbling along of this exploration, whether for ourselves or, with the communities that we are interacting with? And of course, because this is a salon, you can ask the questions too, right? Feel free, Joe and Anja, to ask questions. So, so what are some challenges that we've been facing? Anybody want to jump in?
I know for me,
sure.
One challenge that I have been facing is feeling like I've now done some work and I have more awareness around this topic, and wanting to, when the topic comes up directly or indirectly, wanting to feel confident in holding a space for a conversation where I'm able to share and educate others somewhat about what I've learned. And I am aware that it still triggers discomfort in me, particularly if it's with males, with men. And I'm aware that I can get defensive about it. So it's not always coming from a place of love. But something that has helped me on that journey has been a photo that was in one of the emails I was receiving. I could go back and find which one to credit it, but right now I can't recall which one it was. But it was a poster from a Black Lives Matter rally where someone had said, white privilege does not mean your life has been easy. It just means the color of your skin has not made it harder. And for me, that as a way to share, because it's amazing how activating the word privilege can be. If people, in particular, people who've had incredibly challenging childhoods and lives up to that point, that is the last word that they feel is a fair term to use for them. And yet that is like being able to discuss in around this context, when we're discussing it around anti-racism specifically, kind of that meaning seems to be a helpful unlocking to engage in a useful conversation, not in a defensive, reactive conversation where really you just want to shut it down because it's not helping anybody.
Thank you so much for sharing that quote. That when you shared that with us the first time, it felt really, really powerful. It's not, it just, the color of your skin did not make your life particularly harder. Like that was not the point. Yeah. Thank you so much. Anja, anything to add to that?
I'd like to circle back a little to the book you mentioned, which we try to read chapter by chapter and go into discussion. And I came across this work when it was a free downloadable workbook, so several years ago. And I had so much resistance and procrastination getting into it until I found an accountability partner, which was so important because I then had a date and I knew each Sunday we would call. And I didn't want to say, no, I haven't done nothing. I want to say yes. And it was really different from all the other books I had read before and the talks, because this takes us to the point that I now think is one of the most important points. We have to dismantle all this within ourselves. And I remember the first chapters, which invite us to journal about our own experience, our own internalized stuff, our own stories that we might not want to share publicly. And I still remember this feeling of totally going blank. Nah, I don't know this. I've never done this. And I could pinpoint other people's missteps. And once I came to the point to really sit with it and interrogate myself, that was a place which did not feel good. And even now, some years into this work, it still doesn't feel good. But I feel it's so important to be able to name these things and to be able to recognize, realize things that happen. And only then we can start and build relations that are a little more safe for the Black, Indigenous people of color in our lives. And we can aim to really do repair. Because as long as we don't recognize it and it's still buried in the shade, in the shadows, we can learn and listen and read as much as we want, but it's not embodied. It's not part of our own experience. So this is a point I'm looking forward to further exploring with you. And I would like to invite everybody in the audience to consider taking steps and confronting ourselves with our own internalized whiteness and racist ideations, because this is like so morphed into the culture and societies we grew up in and we are still living in, that this is a huge step. And we never know about the ripple effects it creates.
Mm-hmm. It's powerful. And what I love what you're saying, and this is why Therese's work is so important, is the embodied part, right? Like it's being able to stay with that discomfort, because it's the point. It's like, it's not, in order to explore this, it's going to be uncomfortable when you know that your existence, and it feels so big, right? Like your existence has caused harm. Like I used to feel so guilty for just existing sometimes as a white person, like, and it can just overwhelm you. And of course you're going to shut down. And so you have to have learn skills or learn from people who know how to face discomfort, because that's the only way you're going to get through it. And the accountability, people, so community. And so it's really fascinating to think of it, because this is not the world we live in. We live in a world where, we don't want to feel things, we avoid feeling real feelings. And we're all often numbing our true feelings. But this work requires us to lean into the difficult stuff so that we can lean into the amazing, amazing work. As you said, like the healing that can happen is incredible. Yeah. Jo, anything else?
No, it's just, there were so many pieces to what both of you shared there. And one piece that came up, as you mentioned, the feeling guilty. So I have that in my past as well, 100%. I remember as a child being taken to Aboriginal beautiful cultural places where they would share some of the history, and almost being in tears from beginning to end, to realize that in some way I'm related potentially to people that actually did that the dehumanization of peoples, and was horrified. And even the other day, someone said to me, "Oh, I don't like to think of myself as white. I like to think of myself as Caucasian because I want to separate myself from the people that did that." And I feel like that was quite an awakening that Therese helped me realize that I appreciate that. I appreciate people being frightened to go there, to the concept that purely because you have white skin, you are privileged, whether or not you're related to those people biologically or not. You have simply in being benefited from what happened. You know, there's been a benefit to your life. And yes, your life might still have been really difficult and uncomfortable, and your skin didn't make that harder, you know, and it's just such an interesting place to be willing to go. And the way Therese taught it with this, like, just keep slowing down, you know, just breathe, just slow down, because it feels like one of those topics that people want to do in their heads. And when you do anything in your head, you can argue both sides. It's like a debating competition. There's always a way to justify, to rationalize, to blah, blah, blah. You know, goodness, those that were joining the Nazi party thought they were justified in what they were doing. At least some people did. Like brainwashing, yeah, sure. But we need to be able to go there and like go, this is not a place we're going to get to with our minds alone. You know, bridge it with the body. That's where the real healing is. Yeah. Slowing down.
Ooh, I felt that. Mm-hmm. And that's a really interesting point, because how I got to Layla Saad was through her, and I think Anja too, was through her article. I have something to talk. I have it written down here.
Spiritual white woman.
Yeah. I have to talk to spiritual white women.
Yes.
About.
I have to. White supremacy.
Yes.
Yes. Because I considered myself a spiritual woman. And then at that time, I was like, whoa, she blew it. It's like, I'm a spiritual white woman because all the people I was following was like white women. I was learning from so many spiritual white women. Like, and in that way, that was my first real awakening to my blindness. I don't know why I'm talking about this right now. I've lost track, but it's that idea of disconnection. Yeah. The spiritual bypassing. That's what it was. The idea of like, you know, we can't bypass emotion. We can't bypass the negative feelings. We can't say, you know, I'm going to call myself Caucasian because I want to disconnect. And everybody's experience is valid. But if we do that, then are we really living a spiritual life? Like, are we really living for what we want? Like that connection, that unity, is that really true? And it's not after discovering, after doing the work so far. Yeah. Anja,
I was just going to say, hear you on that article. And I had my own very uncomfortable, triggering experience when I created a summit talking to women about spirituality. And it was a few dear, beautiful, amazing women that I follow that pointed out to me that this is a sea of white faces, Jo, you know, and I was reaching out to people I knew that I was connected to. And it just showed my incredible, lack of awareness of what I was creating was actually in some ways not recognizing a huge number of incredible, beautiful, spiritual teachers that have magic to share on the planet. And though it did allow me to begin reaching out to people I didn't know. And some of them were saying, and I was really honest. And I said, I need to be transparent. I'm reaching out to you because you're a woman of color. I was genuinely, and I love your work now that I've discovered it, now that somebody's pointed out that I have this gap in what I have created. And some people went, that feels yuck. I didn't like the fact you reached out first because I was a woman of color. And others said, let's have a conversation first. They didn't just say yes. We jumped on a call and she said, this is where it needs to start. We have to have these uncomfortable conversations. And then she said yes and was willing to be involved. So it was a really interesting experience for me. And I encourage anybody that's creating things to see who you might get to know and what amazing wisdom they might have to share by diversifying who you learn from and who you follow. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that story, because everybody is, so many people have a version of that, right? It's so, I love that you said it directly. You were like, I'm not going to get this right. I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to be honest. This is what's going on. And you grew so much from that experience. Yeah. Beautiful, Jo. Anja, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, there are 2 points that I would like to speak to that Jo just made. One is the realization that we are in a white bubble. And sometimes it needs a kind of feedback or trigger point that's not nice, because we won't listen. We think we are good people and all that. And this is maybe an invitation to the audience to check, how are my circles? How's my bubble? How's my community? And even if you're not exposed to much diversity in your everyday life, diversify your socials. Check out who are you following, who are you listening to, who are you learning from. And I think we will include some resource. Yes. And you will notice over time how your feed changes. The algorithm learns that you are learning, and it will support you in a way. So this is really important to broaden our perspectives and be open to it. And the other thing I wanted to come back to, when you said about the danger of spiritual bypassing, I think this is also a conversation we have to have with ourselves and with our community. Everybody who thinks they are spiritual people or engage in some kind of religious ways. Religion has been used to validate racism and has been used to make whiteness the superior form of being. And we have to be aware of this. And we also have to research for our specific practice, where are the interconnections, and we have to be aware of not reproducing it.
Mm-hmm. Can you say more about the interconnections? So like the first word that comes to mind when I hear that intersection, the idea of, is that what you mean, or?
What I mean is more like, in Germany, most people still believe we have this Christian background, and Catholic Church has been involved in colonization. They have provided arguments why it would be okay to kidnap and enslave people. They have taken the right to discuss whether First Nation people in the so-called newly discovered countries were human at all. This was where the church played a huge part in it. And this is a continuation. It continues into today's discourse. And I'm not so well versed in other religious practices because I'm not exposed to much conversation about it, but I think we have to be aware of it. And the other thing that comes into play is destroying other people's religious practices, spiritual practices, destroying it, making it illegal, and has been a practice of oppression. And I think that's where the term appropriation comes into the story, because as white people, we are progressives and maybe a little weird, but also interesting if we pick and choose. And I think personally, I think these practices are there for human beings to enjoy and facilitate, but we have to be sure about where did it come from. And that's a discussion that leads, what's the difference between appreciation and appropriation? And especially in the spiritual field, we need to be aware of it, and we have to be on the lookout and check ourselves. I think that was my point.
Yeah, you made it. That's beautiful. Thank you. It's, this question about appropriation and appreciation is definitely one I still grapple with in terms of, I just actually recorded a podcast talking about the divine feminine. And often, we talk in yoga circles, we talk about Shakti. And yoga, comes from India, Hindu philosophy, Hindu religion. I'm sure we can think of many examples of how yoga has been appropriated, but also how beautiful it is to appreciate it, because it's such a necessary human learning. The learning of yoga is such a beautiful, we need it. Humanity needs it, right? We need all the layers, but we can't look at it through the lens of our whiteness, our colon, that lens. And so thank you so much for bringing that up. There's so many ways we can go. But I wanted to keep us focused on what we've actually discussed, the three of us, through our time together. Because I think this is also very important, embodiment and staying in the moment, right? Staying in the moment. And where we have been reading Me and White Supremacy, and we've been doing it at our pace, at a pace that feels good. We discovered that the way we were doing it was not bringing us any alignment. And we decided to take it slow and do a chapter. And the chapters are small, so we had a lot of self-judgment about the pace we were going at, because we're like, we should be able to read this in a month, but that's not the point. The point is doing it at a pace that feels comfortable so that you can embody it and feel it. And some of the topics we've been exploring so far is white privilege, white fragility, tone policing, and white silence. So there's a lot we can talk about to take those topics. We've talked a little bit about white privilege, but is there any of those topics that jumps out to you that you'd like to talk about?
I'm not talking. Sorry, Josette. What jumps to me and what comes up is I'd like to share a little more about our process.
Okay. Yeah.
Definitions can be read. And
sure.
I think it's important. You said we struggled a bit with how can we do it, and we should be going fast. And if we take it serious, we should be further ahead. And this was adding so much pressure. And then I think it was Joe's. Was it your idea? Then we started to actually meet and read together. And it made a difference. It made a difference in reading it out loud in company, being witnessed as we read, being witnessed as we try to dig into the prompts and the questions. And that was the most beautiful part of the conversation, because it took us from our head into our heart. And that's where we were able to connect and show up vulnerably with our guilty feelings, with our not knowing. And we made it a place where we could come as we are and we could share. And there must have been some parts where we can be happy there was no person who was affected by racism in this circle. But we have to go like really dug deep into the dirt to bring out the roots of it. And this is, I think it's so important if we engage in this work. We have to get our hands dirty to speak literally, and we have to go in where it hurts, because that's where the healing lies. And if we don't understand our own reactions, our resistance, we can perfectly rationalize and keep moving it in our heads, but it won't show in a tangible way in our being. And there are multitudes of offerings out there that could be a good starting point. And even if somebody like I have been dealing with this topic of racism and whiteness for more than a decade now. And it's in circles. And this is work that's not ever finished or done. We can say been there, done that. And there's no t-shirt to get. We keep circling, and even after so long, I still have so much profound new experiences, new things I learn about myself and my position in this whole context. And just having this in mind keeps me grounded and humble, which is important to not get into thinking, yeah, I'm good now, I'm safe now, because this directly leads back into the learned behaviors of colorblindness and all that. The invitations are all around us, come back into the white consent. And it needs a deliberate stepping out each and every day in all these situations. And as you said in your introduction, Josette, we fail, we stumble, but it's important to get back on track. And yeah, we have been on that journey.
Yep. Yeah, thank you.
And to that, I feel like honoring you, Anja, for how long you've been doing this work, and the fact that, you know, you have this constant reminder in your life by having a mixed race child. I know you do too, Josette, and partners who are of different races. And what you just shared there is like, it reminded me how I feel like I'm even more obligated now because, and I take that on as a commitment that I'm now saying on this podcast, because it would be so easy for me to like go back and hide in my bubble. My family are all white. My relatives, that's not true. My step brother is married to a Vietnamese woman. But aside from that, you know, like there's limited racial opportunity for me to know people personally who are having this experience. And I'm not also going to go out and try and find the token Black friend and try and like allow, you know, that's like me reaching out, wanting them to help me grow. And like, as we are constantly reminded in all of these trainings, it is not people of color's job to teach us. All right. So that was part of our desire to come together and have this conversation, is like, how can we point people, more people, and encourage them to go and do this work with those that are trained. And we didn't do the dentist thing. So like, Josette, did you want to do the dentist story, or Anja?
Anja's the one who introduced it. Anja's like our guidepost. Like, what was that? That was such a good, we're not here as experts. You know, we're not here as the dentist. Go ahead. Because this came from somebody you listened, from a teacher you admire.
I think it was Tupoka Oget, who is a Black German educator, author, and speaker. about these topics. And I think in probably some podcast episode, she said, just because people have teeth, they aren't dentists. And just because the three of us try to establish an anti-racist practice in our lives, in our work, and engage in this conversation, we are not the educators, we are not the experts, but we invite everybody who has teeth, and in this metaphorical way, which is the metaphorical way to say everybody has experience with racism, be it on the privileged side as us or on the oppressed side. It's worth to seek out experts' advice that can help us heal and grow. And one more name dropping, if I'm allowed.
Yeah, I think this is the time. Actually,
yeah,
please drop. Yeah.
As you just shared that you feel even more obligated to do this work in your white community, your white family. I think it was Rachel Cargill, who is an Afro-American educator, and she said white women's communities are their dinner tables. Something and this is exactly asking us, white women, white people, privileged people, to have these conversations. And this is what we are doing.
This is our dinner table. I'm so grateful to the two of you, incredibly grateful for your willingness to have this conversation at this dinner table, because it's so easy to run away and to say, like, I did it. I read this book. I'm done. And that's not the case. It's not the case, as you both so beautifully said. Wow. There's so much we could talk about.
There's so much more we could talk about. I feel like we've hardly scratched the surface. We can have part 2 and part 3 of this conversation.
Yeah. We could have part 2 and part 3, because I think if we dove in somewhere else right now, I think we'd be on for a long time. But yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you want to, like, in this moment? I guess the point for listeners, one last tidbit that we want to leave listeners with. I guess one tidbit, I feel like we've repeated it. We've said it many times, but just find your people who are willing to go get dirty. Find your people, because I know it's the only thing that has kept me going is to be with these two women. Well, not the only thing, but definitely it's what keeps me, my heart is there, but they're the two that help me just face my heart fully. Without them, I would be putting it on another to-do list, and it's not in alignment. So find your people, find your dinner table. There are a lot of people out there who want to do this work. It might be somebody you don't know. You meet through a program, or it might be through a hashtag, anti-racism hashtag, or I don't know, something like that. But those people are out there. And anything else you want to leave with?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, to all what you said. And please try and get into your local history, into your local present, and find educators, books, workshops, information, whatever, from your specific place, because this is another side trap. You might look somewhere else over the ocean, and learn all that, but the discourse in like your own country and region is what's really helping you to find your own position, and with what also helps you to find ways to get into action if you feel called to. So that would be like my last piece for today.
Thank you.
And one of the pieces that, for whatever reason, wants to be said still, is just sharing that awareness of how this anti-racism work, how white privilege interweaves with all these other ways that people can hold privilege in terms of gender, sexuality, education, financial. There are so many faces to this inner discovery of the privilege that we hold. And for those of us that are in this privileged space, it feels like, for me, I'm a cisgendered woman, which I didn't even know what that meant, but that means that I was born in the body of a female and I identify as a woman. All these things that I've been learning about and how it integrates. And also, I now feel like if you're doing a big course, if you're learning something and there is not teachings on racism, sexual and gender diversity, and all these aspects at least touched on within the course. I know a course I'm learning right now, it's a really big part. They're incorporating this stuff. It's important. It's important for us because what we want to be, at least I know for me, myself, and I can't speak for you, I want to be a safe place for people, for all people. And not everyone's going to identify as, and enjoy the spaces I create. But for those that do want to be there, I want to be able to hold safe space. And I know to do that, I have to figure out all the unconscious, all the biases, everything that might be in my energetic space, in my mental space, in my cultural conditioning that could be knowingly or unknowingly causing people to not feel safe with me. Like ultimately, that is when we feel safe, that's when we can trust. When we can trust, that's when we can go deep and we can really lean into what love really means. How can we be that for ourselves, our families, and the planet? And do the work. Encouraging everybody, find the spaces that feel like your resonance is there and be ready to get fragile and to have your fragile places poked. And hopefully you find beautiful teachers like Therese that can hold you in that space. She's so generous to have created that training for white women. Mm-hmm. Really hold you there and let you be in it and be uncomfortable because being human, guess what? It's uncomfortable. Lots of it. Mm. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. So this is it. What a beautiful conversation today. Thank you so much to both of you in Germany, in Australia, in Korea. And you're going in the show notes, you're going to find multiple links to even more teachers, especially Anja has shared with us, teachers that she follows and recommends. All the links will be there. You have a lot of resources to get started. And just thank you so much for listening and see you on the next show. Bye.